Ryan had spent years alone on the farthest reaches of human space, stationed on a remote outpost that was little more than a floating scrap heap. The quiet suited him. He was an engineer, not a soldier or a diplomat. His hands, rough from years of work, were more familiar with the hum of machinery than the voices of people. Out here, it was all about survival, fixing what broke, keeping things running, and trying to ignore the vast emptiness of space that surrounded him. This station was far removed from the hustle of human civilization. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave Ryan something he hadn't realized he needed: isolation. Out here, there were no wars, no politics. The air was always thin, the metal always cold, but it was his world. He'd grown used to it, the silence, the solitude. It was a far cry from the life he once imagined, but it worked for him. He liked the distance it gave him from the rest of the universe. That peace shattered the moment the alien ship appeared. Alarms blared through the station, echoing off the walls, an intruder alert from the docking bay. His first thought was a malfunction, maybe a glitch in the system. But when he checked the control panel, there it was, an unidentified ship docking at the station. He wasn't expecting visitors, not out here in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Ryan threw on his jacket and headed to the docking bay. There was no one else to deal with it, and he wasn't exactly sure what he was walking into. He arrived just as the bay doors hissed open, revealing a sleek, unfamiliar craft, unlike anything he'd seen before. Out stepped the most stunning figure he'd ever laid eyes on. Elira. Her presence was commanding, her beauty striking. She didn't look human, but there was a grace to her that transcended species. Her skin shimmered faintly under the artificial lights, her features sharp yet delicate. She was taller than him, standing with a confidence that made it clear she wasn't here to negotiate or ask permission. She was from the Selkari race, a species known for their beauty and intelligence, but also for their reputation as master manipulators. Ryan had heard stories about the Selkari, their power, their ability to twist lesser species to their will. They were dangerous, and this one had come to his station for a reason. He didn't know what, but the way her gaze locked onto him made it clear she wasn't here by accident. He stepped forward, ready to greet her, maybe ask what she was doing here. Before he could get a word out, she spoke. Her voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. "You're what I need," she said. The words didn't make sense at first. What could she possibly need from him? He was just an engineer, nothing special. But before he could even react, she moved. Swiftly, with a precision that left him no time to resist, Elira grabbed his arm. In a blur, he was pulled onto her ship, the doors closing behind him before he could even process what was happening. Ryan struggled to break free, his instincts telling him to fight, but Elira was stronger than she looked. Her grip was firm, unyielding. "What are you doing?" he managed to ask, his voice edged with panic. "You'll understand soon enough," was her only reply, her expression unreadable. Panic set in as the ship's engines roared to life. He watched the small, run-down station that had been his home for years shrink into the distance as the ship shot off into the dark expanse of space. He was no longer in control, no longer the master of his small, solitary world. He had no idea where he was going, why he had been taken, or what this Selkari woman wanted with him. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The Selkari were known for their manipulation, their ability to turn people into pawns for their own gain. He'd heard the stories, but now he was living it. He felt powerless, caught in a web that he didn't even know existed. All he knew was that Elira had plans for him, and they were bigger than anything he could have imagined. For now, all he could do was sit in the confined space of the alien ship, his mind a whirlwind of questions. But deep down, he knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. Ryan awoke, his head pounding and his senses disoriented. The room around him was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Smooth surfaces gleamed with a metallic sheen, and soft lights pulsed through strange patterns along the walls. He was in an alien vessel. The luxury of the space felt suffocating, an odd contrast to the cold, impersonal technology that surrounded him. He wasn't used to this, being out of control, not understanding what was happening. His instinct was to escape. He tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Everything in this room seemed designed to hold him. Panic started to creep in. He moved to the walls, searching for anything, some kind of hidden panel, a way out. His fingers fumbled against unfamiliar surfaces, his breathing quickened. But before he could make sense of anything, the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Elira stood there, calm and unbothered, as if she'd anticipated his reaction. "You won't be able to leave," she said, her voice steady, without a hint of threat. Ryan stared at her, frustration and anger welling up inside him. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. "Why bring me here?" For a moment, Elira didn't respond. She walked into the room, her presence commanding despite her delicate features. "We need your help," she said finally, her tone softening, but there was a gravity to her words. Ryan scoffed. "Help? I'm just an engineer. What could I possibly do for you?" Elira's gaze didn't waver. "The Selkari are dying," she said. "Our race is facing extinction. Our genetic structure is breaking down, and it's happening faster than we ever predicted. We've tried everything, every form of advanced technology, every solution we could think of, but nothing has worked." Ryan's skepticism was clear on his face. He didn't understand why she was telling him this, why any of this concerned him. "And what does that have to do with me?" "Your biology," she said simply. "Your genetic makeup is different. It's compatible with our technology in ways no other species has been." Ryan shook his head, still trying to process what she was saying. "That doesn't make sense. I'm just a human. What makes me so special?" Elira stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "We don't know why," she admitted. "But we've studied humans for years, and none of them have shown the potential that you do. Your DNA, your genetic structure, there's something in it that could hold the key to our survival." The weight of her words pressed on him, but Ryan wasn't ready to accept any of it. "So you just abducted me? Without even asking? You don't get to make me your experiment." Elira's expression softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "We didn't have a choice. Time is running out for us. We needed someone like you, someone whose biology might be the answer we've been searching for. If we didn't act, my people, my entire race, would be gone in a matter of years." Ryan could feel the desperation in her voice, but it only made him more wary. "And what happens to me? What am I supposed to do? You're asking me to trust you with my life, and I don't even know what you really want." "I'm asking you to help save us," she said, the vulnerability in her voice more noticeable now. "You're not just a prisoner. You have a choice." Ryan paused, weighing his options. He was just a man, alone in an alien ship, with no real power in this situation. But somehow, he was being told that his biology could determine the fate of an entire species. It felt absurd, unreal, yet the fear in Elira's eyes was genuine. She wasn't just a manipulator playing a game, this was life or death for her people. But still, Ryan couldn't shake his doubts. "What happens if I say no?" Elira's expression hardened slightly. "You're free to refuse. But know this, if you do, you may be condemning an entire species to extinction. I'm not forcing you. I'm giving you a chance to make a difference, a chance to save countless lives." The weight of the decision bore down on him. He didn't know what to believe, or how to feel. He wasn't a hero. He was just an engineer, a man who had spent years running from the complexities of life. Now he was being thrust into a situation where his choices mattered more than he ever imagined. "I need time," he said quietly, the fight in his voice gone. Elira nodded, understanding. "Take the time you need. But know this, we don't have much of it left." As she left the room, Ryan sank into a nearby chair, his mind spinning with questions. Why him? How could his genetics be the answer to such a crisis? Could he even trust Elira, or was he just another pawn in a game he didn't understand? But as he sat there, alone in the cold, alien room, he realized something. Whether he liked it or not, his life had changed forever. He had a decision to make, and no matter what he chose, nothing would ever be the same again. Ryan sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had been an ordinary man just days ago, working on a forgotten space station, isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Now, he was trapped in a situation that seemed impossible to comprehend. As much as he wanted to reject it all, to pretend this wasn't happening, the pieces were starting to fit together. Elira stood before him, her expression grave. "There's something you need to know," she began, her voice steady but carrying a weight that told Ryan what she was about to say wasn't going to make this any easier. "Centuries ago, long before humanity rose to what it is now, my people, the Selkari, made contact with your ancestors." Her words hung in the air for a moment, and Ryan struggled to process them. Contact? With humans? It sounded like some long-lost myth. But Elira continued, her eyes locking onto his as if to emphasize the gravity of what she was revealing. "Your bloodline, Ryan, is connected to ours. There was an ancient pact made between the Selkari and a small group of early human civilizations. That pact has been forgotten by time, lost to the ages. But your bloodline carries the remnants of that agreement." Ryan stared at her, his heart racing. He wanted to argue, to dismiss it as some mistake or fabrication. But deep down, he could feel the truth in her words. It wasn't just a wild theory, there was something stirring inside him, something he couldn't explain. "What does that even mean?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost afraid to know the answer. Elira took a breath, her gaze unwavering. "It means that your ancestors were entrusted with something vital to my people. A knowledge that has been passed down through your bloodline, lying dormant for centuries. That knowledge includes the key to a technology we believed lost." Ryan's mind reeled at the implications. His bloodline? Ancient technology? It was too much to take in. "And now you need me to unlock it," he said slowly, piecing it together. "Yes," Elira replied. "That technology has the power to save my people. But it's not just a tool. It's a force, a power that can reshape entire civilizations. In the wrong hands, it could cause unimaginable destruction. But with your help, it could be used to stabilize the Selkari genetic structure, to prevent the extinction of our race." The enormity of what she was asking of him began to settle in. He wasn't just a man anymore. He wasn't just an engineer, living his life in the shadows of a forgotten station. He was now the keeper of something that could change the fate of an entire species. The responsibility of it all nearly crushed him. Ryan leaned forward, his head in his hands. How am I supposed to handle this?" he muttered. "I didn't ask for any of this." "I know," Elira said softly. "But you're the only one who can help. Your genetic structure is the key to unlocking this technology, and without it, my people don't have a future." Ryan felt a wave of disbelief wash over him. He'd spent his life avoiding complications, avoiding the burdens that came with responsibility. And now, he was thrust into the center of a galactic conflict he never even knew existed. It felt surreal, like a dream he couldn't wake from. But there was no denying the truth of Elira's words. He could feel it inside him, that connection she spoke of. His ancestors had been a part of something far larger than he'd ever imagined. And now it had come full circle, falling on his shoulders to decide the fate of an entire race. Ryan looked up at Elira, his face grim. "What if I fail?" he asked quietly. "What if I can't do this?" Elira's gaze softened, and for the first time, he saw a vulnerability in her. "You won't be alone," she said. "I'll be with you every step of the way. But the choice to help, that has to come from you." Ryan felt the weight of that choice bearing down on him. He could refuse, walk away, and let the Selkari face their extinction. But if he did, would he be condemning them to a fate they didn't deserve? He wasn't sure if he had the strength to carry the burden, but the thought of doing nothing felt just as impossible. He sat in silence for a long moment, wrestling with the decision that would define everything. His hands tightened into fists as he closed his eyes, trying to push back the fear, the doubt. Finally, Ryan exhaled slowly and nodded. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But understand this. I'm doing this because I don't see any other choice. I'm not some hero." Elira nodded, her expression both relieved and serious. "Thank you, Ryan. That's all we ask. Together, we can find a way to make this right." But even as the words left his mouth, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He knew that nothing would ever be the same again. And whatever lay ahead, it was far beyond anything he had ever imagined. As Ryan began to grasp his role in this intricate web of destiny, the situation took a darker turn. What had seemed like a desperate plea for survival from the Selkari was now shrouded in deeper, more dangerous layers. Elira sat with him, her face showing signs of strain he hadn't seen before. She had always been so composed, so certain, but now there was a vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "There's something you need to know," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Not everyone in my race wants us to be saved." Ryan's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Elira looked down for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "There's a faction within the Selkari, a group that believes our extinction is not just inevitable but necessary. They think we've gone too far with our power, with our manipulation of other species, and that our downfall is part of restoring balance to the galaxy. They see our survival as a greater threat to the universe than our extinction." Ryan's mind raced. He had thought the stakes were clear. He was here to help save a dying race. But now it seemed there were Selkari who wanted the exact opposite, and they were willing to do anything to ensure that their race didn't make it through this crisis. Worse, Ryan realized, if they knew about him, they'd see him as a direct threat to their plan. Elira's voice dropped to a whisper. "They know about you, Ryan. They know you're the key to activating the technology that can save us. And now, they'll try to stop you." A chill ran down his spine. It was one thing to be caught up in a galactic crisis, but now his life was hanging in the balance too. He wasn't just the savior of the Selkari, he was a target. For the first time, Ryan saw the cracks in Elira's facade. She wasn't just a manipulative leader trying to use him for her people's benefit. There was fear in her now, and something else, genuine concern. Her usually sharp, calculating demeanor softened as she looked at him. He could tell this wasn't just about duty for her anymore. "I didn't bring you here to manipulate you, Ryan," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "At first, that's what it was, finding a solution for my people, nothing more. But I didn't expect this. I didn't expect to care." Her words hung in the air, and Ryan felt a shift between them. The distance that had once separated them was beginning to close, replaced by something far more personal. He had been her captive, her reluctant ally. But now, they were bound together in ways neither had anticipated. Elira wasn't just fighting for her people, she was fighting for him too. Ryan didn't know how to respond. He had been thrust into this whirlwind, dragged from his quiet existence into a galactic struggle, and now, in the midst of it all, was this strange connection between them. It made the danger feel even more real. But there was no time to dwell on the emotions stirring between them. Elira's face hardened again, her sense of purpose returning. "There's more. The faction has a plan. They're going to sabotage the technology before you can activate it. If they succeed, it won't matter what we do, my people will die, and you won't make it out of here alive." Ryan's breath caught in his throat. "How do we stop them? We have to find out where they're planning the attack. They're already moving, but we're running out of time." Elira was no longer the cold, distant figure who had abducted him. She was focused, determined to protect not just her race but him as well. Their survival was now tied to each other in more ways than one. As the moments passed, Ryan could see how much this had affected her. She wasn't just fighting for a cause, she was fighting for everything she believed in, and he was now a part of that belief. The two of them worked together, unraveling the plot against them. The radical faction's plan was far more intricate than Ryan had anticipated. These weren't just dissenters, they were fanatics, willing to sacrifice everything, even their own lives, to ensure the Selkari did not survive. The magnitude of their conviction was terrifying. And yet, in the midst of all this chaos, Ryan found himself trusting Elira more than he ever thought possible. Their search led them to a hidden chamber deep within the Selkari's ship, where the radical faction had been preparing to strike. As they approached, the tension between them thickened. They were close, but so was the danger. Any misstep could mean their end. Elira turned to Ryan, her eyes filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "Once we confront them, there's no turning back." Ryan nodded, feeling the weight of the situation bearing down on him. There was no more time for doubt. He had made his choice, and now they had to see it through. The moment of confrontation was imminent, and Ryan could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The stakes were higher than ever, and there was no guarantee of success. But with Elira by his side, he felt something he hadn't felt since this whole ordeal began: hope. Together, they would face whatever came next. But the road ahead was dark, and the threat of destruction loomed closer with every passing second. The air felt thick with tension as Ryan and Elira faced the radical faction. They were outnumbered, but it wasn't just a battle of brute force, it was a test of wills. These radicals weren't just warriors, they were zealots, fanatically devoted to the idea that the Selkari race must end for the greater good of the galaxy. Ryan could see it in their eyes. They believed what they were doing was right, even if it meant annihilation. Ryan's mind raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about the future of two species. If the radicals succeeded, the Selkari would vanish from the universe, and Ryan, the key to their salvation, wouldn't leave this ship alive. But the choice to save them wasn't simple either. The technology he was about to activate could change everything, and it carried consequences he wasn't sure he could fully grasp. Elira, standing beside him, was no longer the cold and calculating figure he had first met. Their journey had transformed her, and Ryan could feel the trust between them solidifying, even under the weight of their impending fate. She wasn't fighting just for her people anymore. There was something personal in the way she stood by him, her determination now entwined with a bond that had grown stronger with every challenge they faced together. As they confronted the leader of the faction, the tension between them was palpable. The radicals tried to manipulate Ryan, planting seeds of doubt in his mind. They spoke of cosmic balance, of the Selkari's history of manipulation, and of the chaos that their continued existence would bring. Ryan could feel the weight of their arguments, and for a brief moment, he hesitated. What if they were right? What if saving the Selkari only caused more harm in the long run? But then his gaze met Elira's, and in that instant, something shifted inside him. The bond they had forged, through danger, through fear, through shared vulnerability, was stronger than the doubts swirling in his mind. He realized that this wasn't just about the Selkari as they had been. This was about a chance to build something new, something different. Ryan's decision crystallized in his mind. He couldn't let fear dictate the future. He had the power to change things, not just for the Selkari, but for everyone. And he could do it in a way that prevented the mistakes of the past from being repeated. In the midst of the confrontation, Ryan outsmarted the radical leader. It wasn't about brute strength, but strategy. He and Elira had planned carefully, using every bit of knowledge they had gathered along the way. But success didn't come without a cost. Some of the radicals refused to back down, and the fight that followed left them battered and weary. There were losses, and Ryan felt the weight of those sacrifices pressing on his conscience. But the moment of truth arrived. Ryan stood before the ancient Selkari technology, his hands trembling slightly as he approached the controls. This was it, the point where everything would change, one way or another. The radicals were subdued, but the decision still lay with him. He could activate the technology, saving the Selkari, or he could let it die with them, maintaining the fragile balance they spoke of. His mind flashed back to all that had led him here, the loneliness of his life before, the isolation he had embraced on that forgotten station. And then, Elira's voice, steady and unwavering, broke through his thoughts. "Whatever choice you make, Ryan, I'll stand with you." Her words, simple but filled with meaning, gave him the final push he needed. He knew what he had to do. But instead of simply activating the technology as it was, he made a choice to modify it, ensuring that the Selkari could no longer use their power to manipulate other species. It was a compromise, a way to protect the future without repeating the mistakes of the past. The room hummed with energy as the ancient machinery came to life, its purpose clear. The Selkari would survive, but their role in the galaxy would be forever changed. The Radicals' vision of chaos would not come to pass, but nor would the Selkari's unchecked dominance. Ryan had forged a new path, one that held hope for both races. As the light of the technology dimmed, Ryan realized that nothing would ever be the same. His life had been irrevocably altered, pulled from the shadows of anonymity into a future where he had played a pivotal role in the survival of an entire species. He wasn't just an engineer anymore. He was a man who had changed the course of history. He looked at Elira, standing beside him, and saw that she, too, had been transformed. Their bond, forged in the fire of this impossible situation, would carry them forward into whatever came next. They had fought together, sacrificed together, and now they would rebuild together. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Ryan couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. The man who once sought isolation was now at the heart of something far larger than himself. He had faced the darkness, both within and without, and had come through it with a sense of purpose he never thought possible. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Ryan felt ready to face it. With Elira by his side, they would navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together, they had the power to shape a new destiny for their people, and for themselves.